Welcome to another episode of Electable. I'm Deb Chubb, and today we're going to take on another topic about the environmental safety here in Indiana. And we are very lucky to have with us one of the best experts in the state. So Ashley Williams has been working on this and other issues regarding the environment for many years. And so Ashley, I would love it if you would just give us a little bit more about your background and what kind of stuff you've been working on. And then, of course, what you're working on now.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Deb, for having me, and thank you for your kind words. Hi, y'all. Ashley Williams here. I live in Michigan City, Indiana, and I am the executive director of Just Transition Northwest Indiana. Just some background on me. I've been here for actually coming up on 6 years. I'm originally from Illinois, from Ottawa, Illinois, and so when I talk about my background and how I came to find this work and who I am, I really talk about me growing up really within an extractive sacrifice zone. And so I've really known extractive industry and been around it most of all my life. My dad worked at the nuclear plant, the Exelon nuclear plant, LaSalle Station back at home in Ottawa. And little known, I think, about LaSalle County, where I grew up, is that it's actually known as the frac sand capital of the Midwest, and even some of the largest in the country. And when we talk about frac sand, what I am meaning when I talk about that is that it's the sand that's used for hydraulic fracturing. And so we have mines all over LaSalle County. If you look at it actually from the sky, it looks like the moon. Just because it's been so decimated and carved out because of industry coming in, and no longer is it being just servicing mom and pop shops or just for glass manufacturing. We still have a lot of that in Ottawa. It's going for hydraulic fracturing, and because of the oil and gas boom. So it just blew up, and with the boom we saw a boom in LaSalle County. So I really didn't know growing up what was happening in my backyard in that degree before really waking up in my early 20s. And so I began to organize with a group of rural farmers against the proliferation of the mining operations. And so we kind of got together this ragtag team of folks that were really being hit hard on the front lines in terms of their generational farms being ripped away from them because they had a mine that was proposing to site right next to them. And so these farmers were just being encircled by all these different mining proposals and transportation facilities and so on. And really my main awakening into this was when I found out that there was a mine that was being proposed outside of Starved Rock State Park. And so I know for a lot of folks who are from Illinois, Chicago, and around the area into here in Northwest Indiana, they know about Starved Rock State Park and just how much of a precious gem that it really is. And so the fact that we knew about this mine that was proposing to open directly adjacent to the park entrance, and knowing that all of the respiratory issues and the environmental impacts, the fact that they were just going to be decimating wetlands on the site, as they unfortunately tend to do, was just and I was in awe and shocked at that, being that I never had really any previous environmental organizing experience or any sort of professional experience up until that. And so I felt it in my heart that I really wanted to speak out about this after reading about it actually in a paper. And so I showed up to a council hearing, actually, just I think about a month or so later after I read about that. And it was when they had a transport facility that was coming in to service this mine. And so I came up, and everyone's like, who is this girl? And I just came up to the mic and I just started speaking out against it. And how could you? And the fact that you're stealing away our future. And at that point, right, as a young person, I was actually 20 at the time. I'm now 32. And, they weren't used to that. This was before, the youth climate strikes, and the fact that really there was now this worldwide awakening, which has been beautiful and amazing to watch. And so I stood there and then started to friend all the folks within the room. And so it was such a beautiful night. And so I really started to grow a family through that, and community through that. And I will say, lastly, too, just with background on what's happening with LaSalle County today. Actually, there was just an explosion just before I actually hopped on here with Deb. There was an explosion in January and in LaSalle, just outside of Ottawa, at Karis Chemical, and so a fire broke out, and they blanketed the community with potassium permanganate and the chemicals within that. And so there was there's a lot of mass concern across the community because of mercury, because of manganese, which in high concentration is just terrible and detrimental to human health, and especially to those most vulnerable, including young folks. So I've been trying to work with the community there and connecting them to resources and supporting as I'm able to, given this explosion, the fact that, as I've touched on, there's just so many interconnected issues back at home. And it's really been such a cumulative impact of issues stemming from the frac sand mining, stemming from this recent explosion that I said, as mentioned, just blanketed the community. And they're still recovering the operation currently. They're rebuilding the plant because it was just devastated. So there's a lot of unknowns within the community, the exposure, and so on. And lastly, I'll say that we have a legacy issue at home with radium contamination. And so when I talk about my mentors and the fact that we stand on the shoulders of giants and the people that we look to and come before us, I think a lot about the Radium Girls and the fact that a long time ago, back in the 1920s through the 30s, there were women that were unknowingly poisoned by radium by their employers because they were told to ingest it when they were painting watch dial faces for folks that were on the field, right, for servicing the military. And they slowly ingested the paint and had no idea that radium was bad for them because they were telling it was a miracle. And you had the president and you had the celebrities and folks at the time, just everyday people that were hailing it as this miracle. And so they would put it in chocolates, and it was in water, and it was a magic elixir. And so they were seen as just these shining women and really a societal symbol and women that people aspired to be. And unfortunately, they met a very early fate. Some lived out longer lives, but many of them fought on their deathbeds to be able to get justice for what they suffered at the hands of the malfeasance of industry. And so I just wanted to kind of wrap it up there in terms of where I come from and why I do this work and fighting for my home, where I come from, and thinking about today, what does that look like for Michigan City and for the region where I now call home. And it's very much, I've always continued to fight for environmental justice. It's really been in my blood and in my heart for a very long time. So I have really, with building Just Transition Northwest Indiana, that's what I aspire to do. And we aspire to do within our work is ensuring environmental justice for folks here in Michigan City and across the region.
That's an amazing story. And it makes me so grateful that you're here in Indiana now with us, because I know that you have adopted, Michigan City as your home. And I can see you care for it as much as you cared for your own home. And we have lots to care about here in Michigan City. What we're going to talk about mostly is coal ash. And I think that, that's what drove, I think, the creation of Just Transition Northwest Indiana. I believe that refers to the transition to shut down coal burning electricity producing plants like we have in Michigan City, and which we have, all over. I mean, they're everywhere. They're all over. And I think many people know now that Indiana actually has more coal ash ponds than any other state. Coal ash, of course, is the waste product from burning coal. It's the ash that comes out. And as we know, full of all kinds of very toxic heavy metals, mercury, arsenic, I don't know, cadmium, I think. I mean, there's really a lot of bad stuff in there. So, and what the electricity generating plants did was take the coal ash. Well, first they put it in the ground over by pines in the neighborhood. But then when, we all realized that wasn't a good idea because everyone was getting sick, they put it into coal ash ponds right on site, right next to their plants. These plants, because they use water to cool their operations, are all located next to major waterways. And of course, here in Michigan City, the electricity generating plant is located right next to Lake Michigan. And the coal ash ponds are located between the generating plant and Lake Michigan. So, and of course, there's no liner under those pits. That is, all of that, every time it rains, all of that, precipitation is pushing those toxic metals and everything into the ground, which of course migrate right into Lake Michigan, which is our source of drinking water. And this is a problem around the state. They're on the Ohio River. I don't know if there's one on the Wabash, but it is a problem all over the state and all over the country, frankly. But we're gonna just talk about Indiana, and we're mostly just going to talk about Michigan City. So you created this organization, Just Transition Northwest Indiana, and the idea was to really, like you said, you were in a sacrifice zone, and now the area around the electricity generating plants, those are becoming sacrifice zones as well. Of course, they're already experiencing all of the air pollution that comes with a coal burning plant, both in terms of the emissions, and in the fact that piles of coal just sit there with the wind blowing across it into these neighborhoods. So you have really wrapped your arms around the neighborhood, around our electricity generating plant here in Michigan City, and have done such an amazing job of really engaging the local community. It's hard to engage people in these kinds of disputes. I've done it, I've done work before. I worked on lead issues, and same sorts of sacrificial zones. And it's really hard. It's hard to get people, they're already just trying to live. And so asking them, well, now we want you to take on this kind of altruistic, mission that will take up a lot of your time and really piss you off a lot. And so it's hard. But you have done an amazing job, and you've worked with great local organizations like NAACP, and others, and other organizations. But first, we need to figure out, what is the real problem here. So if you can tell us, you've done work mostly with EPA, but also, trying in the state legislature. So there's a lot of ways to look at this. So why don't we start first with the Indiana State Legislature, because that's going to be the shortest story that we have to tell about action to remedy this. So tell us what you've been working on with the state legislature and where we are now.
Thank you. I think, again, thank you, Deb, for your kind words, and feel exactly the same way. With the state legislature, oh my gosh, it has been another circus of a year at the Indiana State Legislature. There was a lot of incredible momentum and amazing just people power that was moving this session. I do want to give a shout out to Confront the Climate Crisis, which is a youth-led organization, and it's entirely youth-led. And so the amazing folks within, such as Raul Duray and all of the students and folks that make up that group, they actually had a lot of momentum, as mentioned, advancing climate legislation. So they wanted to establish a climate solutions task force, and they got a very impressive number of Republican sponsors. And so this was very much bipartisan legislation that they were introducing within the state Senate. They did get a hearing on it. And so Senator Niemeyer did agree to a hearing. And so they got 30 straight minutes of being able to speak their truth, and got a number of experts and just groups in solidarity speaking in support. And unfortunately, that bill was not brought to a vote. And so I think that's incredibly telling of the Indiana State Legislature and just where we're at today, and the fact that they can just again just turn away. And the fact that they've had for, I mean, they've been building up to this point. And rather than again really hearing the cries and the calls of those that have again are most impacted and the ones that are due to inherit the climate crisis, right. They're knocking at their doors and saying, do something, right? Save us, do anything, something. And this is where it starts as a task force, which feels right, like a very, very reasonable ask. Right. Beautifully written, again, everything that you could imagine was in it. And so that was refused for a vote. And unfortunately, that again, like as mentioned, is really the course of what we saw within the legislative session that's still continuing. And what happened too is thinking about what we've been doing is we were able to get coal ash bills introduced again within this session. This has been now 3 years of working with Representative Pat Boy, as everyone knows, and has been such an ally, as well as Senator Rodney Pohl. And so now for the third session in a row, previously actually with former Senator Karen Tallien at the start, we have been introducing these bills. I talk about this fondly. I think Susan might have mentioned on the show as well, but I remember the first time we all came together, it was Thanksgiving weekend, and we're all compiling on a Google Doc what we wanted within this legislation. So it was just this beautiful brainstorm and wish list of all of the things. And then we narrowed it. We took it to legislative services. And ultimately that was the first year of our legislation. And so essentially just for folks, what this was calling for and what it has called for is a clean closure of coal ash pits that are in contact with groundwater, in the floodplain, just in vulnerable areas like in seismic zones as well, and ensuring that that toxic ash is fully removed, moved to higher ground, land filled with a liner, as you mentioned, Deb, is the fact that there's so many that aren't, and then ensuring that if not that also, and that rather are ensuring that the ash is also encapsulated and beneficially reused, such as in cement and wallboard and all that. So that's what we mean when we talk about clean closure, and what we called for in the legislation, and directing the Indiana Department of Environmental Management to heed that, to mandate that, and ensure that that's what's implemented within their program. And so our bills also, though we didn't make it to a hearing, we tried to advance it. We did everything we could in terms of continuing to make direct outreach and lobbying legislators, and getting even a Republican co-sponsor, Senator Suklik, on the Senate bill. And again, unfortunately, it did die. And so this was the third year, and we're still very committed to seeing progress at the state legislature and keeping on with really that rally cry around the fact that, as we're talking about with the climate crisis and the very interconnected coal ash crisis in our state, that we have, right, coal ash pits that are just sitting, polluting, in contact with groundwater, and same with our drinking water supplies. And so where we're at today with legislation is we've been watching a bill called House Bill 1623. And this is actually a bill that folks can still take action on. Essentially, what it is we see it as very burdensome, unnecessary red tape for our state agencies, and having to add extra hoops for them to jump through, and preventing them from doing their jobs. And so basically what this is it boils down to impacting the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, but all of our state agencies. Mm-hmm. And what it looks like for IDEM is that basically it says that they cannot institute more stringent than rulemaking program to regulate coal ash. And so we know that the federal rule is very lax. There are many glaring exemptions and issues with it. And we'll talk about that here a little bit later in terms of what that looks like on the local and the federal front. But we know that that's the case, and IDEM is understaffed, is underfunded. And so that's what it's been in the state of Indiana, is there has been very lax regulation and action on coal ash. And So in 1623, HB 1623, we really want to stop that. And we have Hoosier Environmental Council and other allied groups that are taking action and really leading on this issue. So folks can actually call up their senator right now and ask for them to vote no on House Bill 1623. I will say lastly is that there's a number of other bills moving. I mean, we know that we've been seeing a slurry of environmental justice, but as well as anti-social justice bills. And so please do take action in whatever way you can, right? Support the amazing work on the ground from ACLU to Planned Parenthood and the other groups that are doing this work and against the laws and bills that are really undermining our fundamental human rights. So there is, again, no shortage of ways that they can take action, that folks can take action, and just really want to implore folks to reach out, know who your legislator is, right, first and foremost, and make those connections, because there are so many resources available and ways to stop the bad, but also think about the good and seeing hopefully some progress from this session, even though, again, it feels like for us, especially for within the environmental justice movement, it was such a gut punch with the coal ash legislation and with the climate bills. But I know that, again, we are very dedicated to continuing to see it through and take local action, especially right now. So we have a lot of exciting things that are coming up and planned. And so I just want to say, lastly, is just shouting out Representative Pat Boy and Senator Rodney Pohl, because if not for them, like, again, none of this would be possible. And they believe so much in the issue, and they really believe in frontline issues and the issues that impact everyday people. And they're always, and they have been consistently on the side of good and justice and doing what's right by the people in their constituency. So I think, Deb, you would agree.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, yeah. And I want to talk about, it makes me want to ask, well, where are the legislators from these other coal ash sites in Indiana? Where, why aren't they with us? What's going on? But anyway, we'll get to that. That's another conversation.
Can I say one last thing?
Sure.
So it was really fascinating. I will say, because I know Susan's going to be like, you needed to mention this, but there's a bill called Senate Bill 9. And so basically it focuses on the disposal of like renewable energy technology.
Right.
We're like, talking about.
I think that's from our own Jim Pressel, isn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah, he's up here too. Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, it's been a capacity thing. So we try to follow as much as we can, but as a small team. So we've been taking notice of that. And I will say that Senator Walker actually made a comment in the Indy Star article recently that basically admitted to the failure of the supermajority of leadership, that said, basically, I know we failed on coal ash. we could have done more. We failed on coal ash. Let's not fail on this. And, regarding to Senate Bill 9.
I did see that.
That
remark.
Right. And I'm just like, oh my, and I mean, yes. And I'm, the fact that he actually said that, I was shocked and admitted to that. But just the irony of the fact that they think that this isn't after, like, there's nothing we can do now. We just need to move on to the next thing. And the coal ash action is just done for. There's still so much they can do, but refuse. And so just pointing that out, that like, please, everyone, check out that recent Indy Star article.
I have found the distinction. I have clarified this seeming inconsistency, because of course it came up again when the governor was outraged that the EPA was going to bring some of the toxic waste that was spilled from the East Palestine, Ohio train crash to Indiana. What? No, all of a sudden, no, we can't have any of that in Indiana. And you're like, well, we already have a lot of toxic stuff. That site where that toxic stuff was going to from East Palestine was a lined, regulated, controlled landfill. And it was approved by the EPA to take such toxic waste because of the safety precautions that they take at that landfill site. They have a significant liner, it's a double liner. They have a leachate collection system so that precipitation doesn't allow any of the toxic stuff to go outside of the lined area. And they have, monitors, water monitors to make sure that somehow there's not a leak. But our coal ash is sitting in an unlined pit right next to our source of drinking water and held there really basically by an old rusty seawall that is starting to, leak. So, so I mean, so what's the inconsistency? Why so much outrage about this, and why so much concern about the future waste that may be produced in 30 years from renewable energy sources like solar panels?
Yeah.
Well, the fact is those companies are not paying off the legislators yet. There's no one, and they're paying them. No one from the railroad over in Ohio is paying our legislators. So of course they can be outraged about them. And, and no one from the, solar energy people are paying at least enough, yet to keep the legislators from picking on them. But the coal industry, the utility industries, they pay good money to keep those legislators quiet on the coal ash issue. So that's where the difference is. I don't, yeah. So anyway, but I do want to talk about too, because so now we'll switch a little bit to the EPA, the federal regulators, and so they have we talked earlier, and it sounds the rule from 2015 is the one that's requiring any coal ash cleanup, but it didn't cover enough. So tell us what the problem is with the current regulation of cleaning up coal ash and these transitioning coal burning plants.
Yeah, thank you for that. And going through, and I have an added comment at the end of this, but to answer your question, there's so much moving. So essentially, with the EPA, with the federal rule, initially that was passed in 2015 under the Obama administration, and they basically passed good enough legislation. What they saw is good enough at that point. And basically, it was the first of its kind in terms of really addressing the impacts of coal ash on water, offering a lot of comprehensive regulations within it, and so on. So it was seen, I think, as a win in many regards. But the deeper that we took a look at it, and the more that we got involved in the local coal ash work here in Michigan City, and the fact that we have this ticking coal ash time bomb in our backyards on the shores of Lake Michigan, we realized within the 2015 rule, sorry about that, that we have this glaring omission, this glaring exemption contained within the rule. And basically what it does is that it's 300 landfill sites across the country, or 500 million tons of coal ash that sit within these legacy inactive landfill sites. And so what I mean when I say that is that all of this ash that was produced pre-2015 that was landfilled on site, and this isn't, these aren't coal ash ponds, but it's landfill. All of that waste is just not regulated under the EPA. This is what's regulated is the active stuff. It's the coal ash ponds. And so that's why NIPSCO is currently is wrapping up their excavation or digging up the coal ash from those ponds here in Michigan City, and leaving all of the landfills, the landfill ash rather, what we estimate is up to 2 million tons.
Just here in Michigan City.
Just in Michigan City, that is staying there indefinitely on the shores of Lake Michigan. And so that just is not part of the federal regulation. And so as mentioned, is like they passed what they did and got it through, but now we have a real opportunity under the Biden administration, and the fact that we need to continue to hold the Biden administration accountable and ensuring that all of these promises they've been making, and as I was talking to Deb earlier, is that Biden has not been following through on, such as with the passage of the Willow Project that opens up Alaska and sacred lands to even more drilling. He is not delivering on it, but with the EPA and with this rule now coming up for review, we're really hoping that we can get the closure of this exemption, this loophole, once and for all, and that all of these communities, including Michigan City, Waukegan, Illinois, and those across 38 states, are finally allowed to have access to hope, and that finally coal ash that's sitting in their backyards will be regulated. Now, we don't know for sure if that is going to be definitively in the rule, but we are optimistic that when the draft rule comes in and up for comment on May 5th, that we'll see that they're going to address this exemption and hopefully strengthen the federal rule. So that glaring loophole that has just devastated our communities for, up in Michigan City, it's been almost a century.
Right.
And ensuring that that's closed, for once and for all. So that's a big opportunity that we're seeing right now. And I can share a little bit about, I know that was a lot, but how did that come into effect? So I can share a little bit about the legal end of that, and the fact that the reason that now EPA is looking at the reviewing and updating the coal ash combustion residual rule is because of a consent decree that was reached with Earth Justice, NAACP, and other plaintiffs. So just really quickly on that. So that's basically what happened. Earth Justice came to us. I guess it was probably, it's been maybe a year and a half ago when we were originally talking about this and the thought of taking legal action. And so we had this discussion, and ultimately it resulted into Earth Justice taking the lead and filing a lawsuit against the EPA for their failure to regulate these inactive landfills that have no small footprint across our communities. And so they finally filed suit. And so over the past few months, all of the, with the legal settlement and discussions, ultimately what's transpired is a consent decree that instructs the EPA to review the coal combustion residual rule, to ensure that they consider updating to include the exemption, the removal of that exemption, and to, again, overall strengthen the rule, because there is a lot of glaring issues. It's not even just that, it's also just local implementation of the rule, and the fact that there's so many plants, right, that are in non-compliance. And so that's a number of issues too that need to be addressed in addition to this, but we feel hopeful. And I was actually a standing declarant on the lawsuit as well, and felt very deeply that I wanted to be able to tell my story and why does this matter, and the fact that Michigan City, again, deserves to be able to not fear this ticking time bomb, and that at any point,
so right, because when they close, in 2028, they at least the plan is to take down that building. Then there will be all this kind of open land, and then we have to talk about, well, what will that land be suitable to use for? Because much of it is this unregulated coal ash landfill. And so when you say that, yes, Michigan City does deserve to have some control over how that piece of property is managed. Is it going, and it is right on the lake. It's very, it's a wonderful piece of property that, if the utility was not there, that would allow access from a community who's had very little access to the beachfront all these years. And so now that that utility is going to be taken away, can those people really use that land? Could it be open to the public? Is it suitable for human contact?
Mm,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
you know what I mean? So this is, these are the stakes that we're talking about. When we talk about how this should be cleaned up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I can't agree enough. I think with this site, if it's not cleaned up, right, none of that will be possible. So
Right.
we always talk about the fact that Michigan City and all of our communities, and like, as we know, again, this isn't just a Michigan City thing. This is the region. This is systemic. Right, when we talk about environmental racism, Michigan City and the West Side community, Gary, East Chicago, these are honestly textbook cases, right?
Right.
Look no further than in Northwest Indiana, the fact that industry in Michigan City and across again into Lake County, the fact that none of those communities can easily access the beachfront, right?
Right.
The beautiful source, right, of wonder that is Lake Michigan for so many things, and the fact that we are so clearly cut off, and there's that dividing line, and so that has everything to do with right Black and brown communities and low income communities being on in the backyard of these coal plants, of these refineries, of the mills and these toxic projects. So none of us across the region or in Michigan City can ever dream of what can be possible at that site if it is going to be this toxic. You talked about, I'll say too, is that you talked about pines, right? With the landfill there that NIPSCO left in their backyard, all of the ash that they contaminated that community. And the community can never come back. They can never drink that water again. And so
No, no.
and the fact that it's I mean, it's still being cleaned up. There's been so many issues and delays with that. It is horrendous
Yeah.
and
And some people are still
inexcusable.
are drinking bottled water.
Yeah,
They
and they
can't they
decided
can't drink the
to
water that comes out of the faucet.
absolutely. And I'll say too is that they decided to, basically draw a line in the sand and say you get water and the rest of you don't. And so,
Right.
yes, there's more homes that are on now municipal water from Michigan City
Right.
that is Lake Michigan. But there are still so many too that are on the well water, the groundwater there. And so that's the way NIPSCO said is that, well, that's not within the plume, but as we know, groundwater flush
Plumes
has
are
minor,
very mysterious.
right?
I've often been very skeptical of people's plume maps. It's like, how do you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
right.
just,
Especially all the work, yeah, within the lead contamination too. So, I mean, that's the thing is that there will be no future for that site if it's just left unremediated. I mean, that cleared up, not remediated, and I mean, they could certainly put another toxic project on there. They could put a warehousing, industrial infrastructure. Sure, they could do that, but that's not right what Michigan City needs. And certainly it's for us to be able to say that and say,
right,
here's what we want to see. And I think a lot of what we'll hear is that we just, again, going back to your point, is we want to be able to access the lakefront. We want every single person, especially the West Side, to be able to access that and walk across and be there and to be able to be within nature and within the lake. And so that is definitely the dream that we have. And so when we talk about this issue, it's right, it's beyond just coal ash, and that's why we talk about what we mean with a just transition. Our work largely focuses on a just transition in the energy sector. So as noted, the fact of transitioning from the carbon-based extractive economy of today, right, dependent on coal and fossil fuels, to the regenerative, renewable economy of tomorrow. And that has, when we talk about that, we really are trying to focus on what does it look like to redress those harms and ongoing pollution issues along the way. And so there is no room for, again, coal ash in our backyards, toxic contamination that remains in place indefinitely in a just transition. A just transition means right equity and justice for all, for the impacted workers, for the impacted communities, and everyone along the way. And so we're excited to see that renewable energy is coming online, but also we need to ensure that their waste is cleaned up, that the community has a say, for that, the future of the site and the future of our city, because we're in such a change moment, as you know, in so many ways.
Right.
And so if we're not there at the forefront of the decision making process, and not even just the seat at the table, but at the forefront, we know that industry and the powers that be are going to make the decisions for us, and ultimately without us, and without leaving us behind largely. So those are all the things, and again, ultimately why we talk about a just transition as this holistic framework, and not just purely retiring the coal plant and bringing renewable energy online. I think too is, for us, we really want to see community-centered solutions, and that
Right.
doesn't mean monopoly utilities having power. We want to,
Right. Right.
we
Right.
talk about dismantling power, and ensuring that, right, we the people, the grassroots are the ones, right, that ultimately are able to reclaim that power that was taken from us, and that has been, because as a consequence of industry coming in and just desecrating our lake shore to make way for all of their toxic infrastructure.
Right. And they're making plenty of money. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not like they're a nonprofit organization over there, and they're making plenty of money. And so I wanted to remember, before we moved away from talking about the state, even though we already have, we'll talk about more of the EPA action. But we have to remember too that part of the real problem at the state level is the IURC, which is the Indiana Utilities Regulatory Commission, which approves rate hikes, and which has very happily willing to raise our utility bills to pay for the cleanup. So we want to talk about helping this community and getting this cleaned up, and there are just so many crises that are distracting from that, and this is one of them. It's that we have to fight. And you did such an extremely great job of really putting together a very well-planned protest event, and a testimony by local people to the IURC. Pat Boy got them to come up and have a meeting here, and it was an outstanding event, and they really heard from local people, and those local people really expressed themselves so well. But the question is, will they still allow NIPSCO to make the cost of the inadequate cleanup, the cleanup we don't even think is good enough, to fall on the backs of us in the community? Because that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So anyway, so this is again another tendril of this octopus problem that we have to work on here. So anyway, so just to get that in there too, that this, who's going to pay for it, is another issue that we are all going to have to argue about, because NIPSCO wants me to pay for the mess that they knew they were making when they made it, and not to invade their profits at all. So that's just another thing we got to fight about.
Yeah.
So, okay, so back to the EPA thing. So we're hoping there will be this rule that is released, a model rule, a proposed rule, released in May. And that's when we will have our opportunity to say whether the rule is adequate or not. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
so we're working our way up to being able to talk about this, educate folks that this is coming, having all of the resources and support ready to go once that rule comes out, and we'll have time to provide public comment, and we're going to be demanding that they have hearings in every region, including Region 5, where we're at here in Indiana, Illinois, and basically the Midwest states. So that will come time for folks to be able to influence, to provide comments, be able to support in person through personal testimony, as well just being there during the hearing. We're hoping to pack the halls as much as possible, and really getting people out en masse to ensure that if indeed it closes the exemption we've been talking about, and is proposing strengthening the rule overall, if it is what we're hoping it will be, and certainly just being able to also talk about just generally ways that they can continue to strengthen it through local enforcement. We are going to be at all of those hearings, providing the public comments and making sure that people from across the country have what they need to be able to make their voices heard on it. So, and we know that too, that industry interest and meddling is going to be a big issue, that certainly the investor-owned utilities, NIPSCO, and all of them are not going to like this. And so we know that they're going to put in a lot of money and a lot of power to try to stop it. And so that's something that folks have to be aware of, as we know in all these processes, that we know the utility lobby and all of them that have power are going to be fighting against it. So we'll be ready.
Excellent, excellent. I know you will. So we're almost out of time, but I want you to just to say, I know that Just Transition, has been just kind of a coalition, up till now, but you're hoping to get a more formal organization established, and that's great. But how can people reach out to help you with this organization and the work you do?
Yeah, thank you for asking about this. My favorite question. So I know we didn't talk as much about the organizing, but we have, so much people power behind us and so many incredible partners behind us, including the LaPorte County NAACP, Earth Justice, Hoosier Environmental Council, Citizens Action Coalition. So to be able to be a part of that, folks can reach out to us using our website, and it's jtnwi.org is the acronym. And so they can fill out and submit their interest to just have us reach out. And if they're interested in becoming a member, folks can reach out to me anytime. So feel free to include my contact information as well, and make sure.
Well, you're just gonna have to say it. You have to say what your contact is.
It's Ashley at jtnwi.org. And it's very easy. And I will make sure to be able to reach back out. Let me know if you're interested, questions. We're always looking for folks to join in. We really focus on the Northwest Indiana region, so largely Lake, Porter, and LaPorte County here, as well as Jasper and Newton. But again, we have support from across the state and the country. So there's a place for everyone in Just Transition NWI, and we're always looking again for partnerships and ways that we can come together to build power for environmental justice across our community. So please reach out to us. And again, we're a very small organization, soon to be nonprofit. So we're getting our footing right now. And so we're really excited to be on this journey and being able to continue to expand internally. And so it's a really exciting time for Just Transition NWI. And there are ways in terms of, again, just being a part. If you reach out to us, you'll be able to join in on our monthly membership meetings. We also have a number of events happening, such as a beach cleanup that's happening for World Water Day. And so that's going to be happening on the 26th, Sunday the 26th at 1 here in Michigan City at Washington Park Beach. So it's going to be a day of fun. We'll have some partners to be able to speak on their issues and just be a fun family-filled day. So we do that. We also, again, do lots of protests and different opportunities, community forums. So again, I think there's a place for everyone to show up and shine within our organization. And I hope y'all will reach out.
That's great. And I just have to say, you've wrapped your arms around this community, and this community has wrapped its arms around you too. People have such great things to say about you here in Michigan City, and they really see your really authentic passion for this and dedication. So you have just done an enormous amount of work, and really has benefited this community very much. So, all right. So we're out of time. So thank you though for joining me. And I hope everyone will, reach out to you and get involved, because it is fun. You're a fun group. I do things with you and it's fun. We always have fun. So anyway.
Emphasis on fun, yes. Thank you so much, Deb. It's a pleasure. And likewise, we always appreciate you. Thanks for the opportunity.